Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Brad Senkiw from All Clemson Tigers, part of the Clemson Maven multimedia platform that covers all things Clemson Tigers. And we have a little Sunday chat here this evening to take a look at the 2023 NFL draft and what happened with the Clemson players who went. 6 guys got drafted, and 2 more got picked up through free agency. So I'll go through all of those and let you know, kind of wrap up what was a really thrilling, exciting weekend of NFL draft action. But first and foremost, I need you to hit that subscribe button. Make sure you're following us and getting caught up to date on all our videos that we're doing right now. Coming up Monday, 7 p.m. It's Monday Live with Jason Priester. You do not want to miss that. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the like button so that you don't miss anything from All Clemson Tigers. So we want you to be all over that. Plus, don't forget, go to allclemsontigers.com for daily coverage, news, analysis, breaking news. We got it all for you over there at allclemsontigers.com. And follow us at All Clemson on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to keep up to date with everything that's going on. So please, we want you to help us out. Now, business out of the way. It's time to get into the NFL draft. I feel like there was a theme this year with the Clemson Tigers, and you got to remember some things about the NFL draft. The mock draft industry is great. I love it. I keep up with it all the time. I got friends that work in that industry. I'm all for it. I have no problem with anything that goes on with the mock drafts. It's a great tool. It's a great resource, and it sort of sets you up and gets you ready and excited for what I think is a wonderful 3-day event the NFL puts on. But at the same time, once the draft occurs, once guys get taken, you forget all that stuff. And I know we get so wrapped up in draft grades and this guy fell and why did he fall and all that kind of stuff. We try to rationalize it all out. And I think at the end of the day, you got to remember the NFL draft is like a market. It's no real different than the sports betting market or the New York Stock Exchange. You're what people say you're really worth, and it doesn't matter what the prognostications are. It's what the NFL teams think of who you are. So, want to keep that in mind. I think that's a lesson to try to always remember after the draft is over. At this point now, it doesn't matter where you were drafted. It doesn't matter what round you win in. It matters who you play for. And I think there's a theme for all the 6 Clemson guys that got taken in this draft. And for me, it's really about good situations. And that's how I evaluate. I don't do draft grades. I don't hand out A's and B's and C's. I just say good draft, bad draft, good team, bad team, good situation, bad situation. And I think all the guys who got taken landed in some really solid places. And that sort of kind of ties into what I was saying. You may not have seen a guy go as high as you thought he would, but boy, he may have ended up in a whole lot better place. And 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when you kind of reevaluating how some of these guys' career went and what it did, I think it's going to be easy to say, man, that really was a good situation. Yeah, he might have gone 20 picks later than you thought, or 2 rounds later than you thought. But at the end of the day, it's about who you play for and what the opportunity ahead of you is. And so, without any more of that, let's get right to where everybody went, and it all starts there, of course, in the first round, where we saw Myles Murphy, the first Tiger, taken off the board at 28th overall by the Cincinnati Bengals. Right after that, you saw the New Orleans Saints come through and scoop up the defensive lineman Brian Bresee with the 29th overall pick. So those were the 2 guys who went on Thursday in the first round of the NFL draft to get things started for the Tigers. And then on Friday night, it took till late into the night, but Trenton Simpson, the linebacker, did go in the 3rd round, 86th overall selection by the Baltimore Ravens. And that wrapped things up on Friday night. And then rounds 4 through 7, you saw the rest of the remaining Tigers all go in the 5th round. KJ Henry, the defensive end, goes 137th overall to the Washington Commanders. You saw Jordan McFadden, the offensive lineman, go in the 5th round, 156th overall to the Chargers. And then to wrap up that 5th round action, Davis Allen, tight end for the Clemson Tigers, went 175th overall to the Los Angeles Rams. So a couple of those guys going out to the West Coast to extend their careers and begin their professional football playing days. I thought all these guys end up in really good places. You start with Miles Murphy, the defensive end, a guy that a lot of people had pegged going pretty early in this draft. I saw him as high as maybe 7 or 8, somewhere in that range. A team like the Atlanta Falcons needed pass rush. They didn't use it there. They went and got a running back luxury pick there in number 8, but still, there was the opportunity, there was availability for a guy like Miles Murphy. And so you might think he slid. You might think he fell a little bit in the draft. I don't think that's how I look at it. I think there were some questions about Miles. I think that by going to Cincinnati, what I read into what the Bengals did there was they play in a tough conference. They play in a league full of great quarterbacks. They got guys in their own division they got to worry about. But you look outside, Patrick Mahomes at Kansas City. You look over on the West Coast, guys like Justin Herbert. I mean, they've got to go through, a gauntlet every year to try to advance through the AFC. They made it to the AFC Championship game this past year. Year before that, they were in the Super Bowl. They're a perennial contender, and they value pass rushing. They know they got to go get the quarterback to win football games. And I think you saw them address that need and say, hey, this is what's going to help us long term. Not necessarily, you're picking 28. You're not trying to get, this great pick that's going to change your franchise. They don't need somebody to change the franchise. They've got DJ Reader, a former Clemson Tiger. They've got T. Higgins there. They've got Joe Burrow, the quarterback. He's the face of the franchise. They've got a lot of pieces. They need someone to come in and give them that bonus, that added pass rush element. So from that standpoint, I thought Murphy went right where he needed to go. I don't think he's a change the game, transcendent kind of guy. He's 6'5", 270 pounds. He's, can really push people off the ball, can get to the quarterback. He'll just be a pure edge rusher there. And I think that's what he needs to be at this level. And there's a little bit of pressure off of him, right? Like he's not got to come in there and be Will Anderson, like with the Houston Texans right away. They're going to expect him to perform. Second he walks on the field, he better be the guy. Murphy doesn't have that. He doesn't have to take on that extra pressure. So I think it was good for him. I think it was a good pick for Cincinnati. I expect big things out of Miles with Cincinnati through his career. And I just think it was probably maybe a sigh of relief, because if you go really high, a lot of times, unless you got lucky with the Eagles, you're going to a bad team. You're going to a team that's probably struggling and needs you, to change their franchise. He doesn't have to do that. I think that is a positive for Miles Murphy in Cincinnati. Plus, he gets to play with a lot of Clemson Tigers there. Jackson Carman also on that roster. So a good team to be around, a good group of guys, a lot of leadership already there. I think the Bengals will push him. And there's, Trey Hendrickson's already there, Sam Hubbard, those guys who are edge guys. He'll fit right into what they're trying to do. He won't have to play every single down. He'll be able to learn in the NFL. I think it's a really good place for him to land. Same thing with Brian Bresee. Brian's a guy that, I'm not saying I've gotten to know him personally, but I think we've all, if you have any involvement in Clemson or anything involvement in college football, you've got to know a lot about him through the tragedy, the death of his sister, Ella, who passed away last year. And just, the family and the support and everybody who wrapped their arms around Brian, and then the way that he handled it all. And he dealt with a lot of injuries last year, but he also dealt with so much heartache and pain. And he wanted to be there for his teammates, his brothers who have supported him. You just pull for people like this. And I don't mean it. I don't even care what uniform he wears, college or pro. You just want to pull for the human side of Brian Bresee and all that he's been through. And you want to see him have success and do well. I think New Orleans is a good place for that. He's got a defensive-minded head coach. He's around a team that I think isn't super far off. They brought in Derek Carr this year to be the quarterback. They've got Michael Thomas still there, Chris Olave receiver. So they've got some weapons, Alvin Kamara. They've got some guys. They need to beef up that defensive front, and I think it was a huge need for them. So I think it was a good pickup for New Orleans. I think it was a good place for Brian to land. I think he'll be around a lot of good people and give him an opportunity. Now he's got to play his tail off. He's on the guys to come in and change the franchise. That's not what he's going to be asked to do. But they're going to push him, and they're going to ask a lot out of him up front, and I think he'll respond. And I'm really pulling for Brian Bresee, but I think it was good to see him go in the first round. He was kind of a tweener guy for me in terms of the first, second round. I wasn't quite sure exactly where he would land. I thought it was more, a specific need kind of fit place. Well, New Orleans was one of those kind of need fit places as they're rebuilding the middle of their defensive line. So good for Brian. Glad he's a first round pick, and certainly wishing him all the best in his career. Trenton Simpson, boy, what a different feel it was around him on Friday. He's a guy who a lot of people thought could go in the first round, and people expected to see him. Some people did at least expect to see him in the first round. Obviously, that did not happen. He got passed over throughout the second round, and he kind of kept thinking, well, maybe he might even go in the third round. And then finally, late on Friday night, he finally got picked up by the Baltimore Ravens. I don't know if you follow the NFL and hopefully you know a bit more about the Ravens defense. It's legit, and they are very well coached. They're very well run. It's a great organization. I can't help but think he is going to absolutely shine there and be given every opportunity to be really good. Now, why did he slip? Why did he fall? Well, Coach Sweeney had this comment from Clemson Tigers, or from the school, that he put out after the draft. He said Trent Simpson is the freak of the draft. He's just the guy that everybody's probably trying to figure out, like, where do you play him? What is he? But I know this: the guy is 230 something pounds and runs a 4.4, and he's strong as an ox. He's one of the best young people you'll ever meet. Unbelievable passion for the game. Still a developing player. Like Miles Murphy and Brian Bresee, he's an early entrant into the draft, and so they're elite talents, but they're still in the progression of becoming what they're going to be, and Trenton is no different. He's a guy that is still developing as a box player, and he's elite in space. He's elite coming off the edge. He can cover. He's a physical tackler. There's just so much you do with Trenton Simpson, and I think the best football is in front of him, end quote there from Clemson head coach Dabo Swinney talking about Trenton Simpson. I agree with all of that. I think Trenton is still a developing player, and I think you have to understand the NFL, unless you're a do-it-all linebacker. Well, there's really two categories. If you're a do-it-all linebacker, if you can go into coverage, if you can play the mic, if you can run the defense, you're probably going to the top 15. But nobody went in the top 15. None of the linebackers that weren't what they call the edge rusher version, which is the second one. Those are the only guys who went in the whole first round. There wasn't a true linebacker taken in the first round. It wasn't until day 2 when Drew Sanders from Arkansas got selected. So I think it's one of those things where you don't really know where Trenton Simpson fits in. It's a little bit like Isaiah Simmons when Arizona drafted him. They weren't sure exactly what to do with him and how to use him. I think there's a little bit of that with Simpson. So teams are turned off a little bit in the idea of you're not going to use a first-round draft pick on that. You're not going to use a guy that isn't isn't a three-down guy, that isn't going to be able to do everything for you. And I think Simpson's sort of one of those guys. He is elite in his athleticism. He is a freak, but I do think you're going to have to figure out, where he best fits into a scheme. I think Baltimore's perfect for that. That's what they do. They take anybody and everybody, and they figure out how to fit him into their scheme. So they've seen something they like in him. They know that he's really athletic. They know they can use him in space. He's going to have to improve his tackling. He's going to improve his ability in the box. He's going to have to get probably a little bit better in terms of reading, his coverages and things like that, and understanding at a high level. But I think he can do all of those things. It's just going to take some time. But they're not going to ask him as a third-round draft pick. They're not asking him to come in and play, every single down. They're not asking him to be Dick Butkus. All right, the NFL has changed. It is not like that anymore. But that's why I think he was not elevated into that first round, because you're just not quite sure everything you're going to get out of a player. Some people might say, well, blame the teams. They're supposed to take great athletes. But there's a difference between a great athlete and being a great football player. And I think Trenton Simpson's still in the developmental side of being a great football player, but I think he landed in the ideal spot for a team to take advantage of his skill set and his ability. They'll fit him into the scheme in Baltimore. He'll be just fine. I honestly, if I were him, I'm just putting myself in his shoes, I would rather have gone in the third round to the Baltimore Ravens, a team that I know is well run and well put together. than getting a little bit extra money and going earlier second round to a team that has no idea what they're doing or no idea where to fit me into. I think that's where when we review the draft, we don't always think about those kind of things. So I think it's actually going to work out pretty well for Trenton Simpson. That wrapped up again on Friday. The only Clemson player taken in the second or third round was Simpson. And then things got restarted again on Saturday. And in the fifth round, KJ Henry going to the Washington franchise there. That was an interesting pick because, he's got Virginia roots. His dad is a huge Washington fan. I think the Commanders, needed some pass rush, needed a guy like KJ Henry to come in there and give them some depth and help them out a little bit. I don't know that their issues with Chase Young had anything to do with it. I almost call them what they used to call them. The Washington Commanders aren't going to renew or aren't going to pick up his fifth-year option on Chase Young. I don't think that KJ Henry necessarily factors into that, but I think they needed some depth there, and I think he fits that need. I think KJ's really good against the run. He's got Ron Rivera as the head coach, a defensive-minded kind of guy. I think it's a good fit. I think he'll being in Virginia, being around his family's roots and his family be close by. I think it's great for him, and certainly rooting for KJ to do really well with Washington. And I think you get every opportunity to stick with the team, and especially against very good against the run. I expect him to get opportunities there, and we'll see how he develops a little bit more from a pass rushing standpoint once he's in the league. How about Jordan McFadden? This might have been my favorite pick of the draft. Really might have been. Los Angeles Chargers. They drafted two guards last year in the 2022 draft. One of those being Sawyer out of Georgia. He was a 6th-round draft pick. He's a starter now. McFadden, a 5th-round draft pick. I'm not saying he's starting over the two guys they took last year, Sawyer and Zion Johnson out of Boston College. But does he have an opportunity to play and be a depth guy? I think so. I think that you're going to see Jordan McFadden have an extended NFL career. Even though he's a 5th-round draft pick, I feel really good about him. His versatility, he can play inside. He's played tackle at Clemson most of his career, almost all of his career, but I don't think that's going to keep him from being a guard at the NFL level, maybe even a center. He has done some snapping at Clemson. It wasn't, game rep snapping, but he did put a lot of work and practice in. But he understands he needs to make that shift to guard, shift to the inside in general. And I think that's a team in LA that is going to give him that opportunity to develop that a little bit. Again, they don't need him to come in and play right away. He's a little bit of a luxury there, a depth piece. He can learn how to play guard. But I sort of see his career going a little bit like John Simpson in Vegas. Simpson didn't start right away. He was a late round guy. He wasn't necessarily expected to just come in and be a starter from day one. There was an injury to Richie Incognito. He needed to step up. Simpson did that. Really helped kind of propel his NFL career moving forward. And I wouldn't be surprised if McFadden lands in a very similar role. When he gets an opportunity, I think he'll be ready. He's one of my favorite players from Clemson in this draft because I just think people slept on him a little bit. I think you're scared off by a tackle moving to guard or center, and I understand that. But I think when you really look at the person, the player, strong as he can be, committed, loves football. I always want to draft a guy who loves football. I absolutely think the Chargers are getting that out of Jordan McFadden. Big fan of this pick, big fan of Jordan McFadden, and I think he's going to have an NFL career that people are going to be cognizant of for a good long time. And then finally, Davis Allen was the last pick there in the 5th, or the last Clemson Tigers selected in the 5th round. I think he went to a good spot with the Rams. Obviously, Sean McVay offense. I mean, everybody's excited about playing in a Sean McVay offense. That was the buzzwords, back a few years ago. Maybe some of the lusters come off that a little bit with the Rams. After they won the Super Bowl, I think people just kind of quit referring to it as the Sean McVay offense all the time. But still, he's in a good system, a scoring system, one that is going to use all players all over the field. They've got Higbee, who's been there a while, but they don't have like a super dynamic tight end. I don't think Davis Allen's super dynamic. I don't know that he's even really good at one certain thing. I think he's good at a lot of things. Not great, but good at a lot of things. And he's a guy that I could see latching on through special teams, doing something really good in special teams and finding a way to make the roster and being used a little bit as a tight end. And definitely, I think a solid blocker, a very high IQ kind of guy when it comes to football. So I think the Rams will find a way to use him. We'll see how long it takes. It may be a year or two down the road, but he's just a guy who really understands the game, and I think we'll find a way to carve out some sort of role here in the NFL. So that wrapped up the guys who got drafted. 2 players were undrafted free agents, and it didn't take long for them to get signed and picked up. One of those being Joseph Ngata, the receiver for Clemson. One of those guys who was in the program a long time, dealt with a lot of injuries early in his career, wasn't really just never got on the same page, I think, with DJ Uiagalelei, the former quarterback. And Ngata just really never developed into that true 5-star receiver. That pedigree that he had coming out of high school just never really happened for him. And, you can make an argument he could have come back for another year at Clemson. Maybe it changes and maybe he gets drafted. I don't know about that, to be honest with you. I don't know that another year going through learning a whole new system, getting used to a completely different quarterback, figuring out ways to be, just to kind of assimilate himself into something new. You're kind of rolling the dice with that. And so I sort of get it. Plus, I think he's 22 years old. He's got his degree. Not everybody wants to be in college forever. I mean, many of us would probably love to go back to college, just for a short amount of time. But at the same time, when you're 22 years old and you got that degree, you fulfilled your obligations to the program. I really don't have a problem with moving on. I don't know that it was a bad decision just because he didn't get drafted. There's no assurance he's coming back to Clemson. Would have gotten him drafted in 2024. Interesting pickup, though, here for the Eagles. They've got a good bit of receiver depth. I don't know that he's going to necessarily find his way onto an active roster anytime soon, but I'm not ruling out that he can't make the team. Probably get an opportunity with special teams, maybe get I think he get opportunity as a practice squad guy, and that's certainly not a bad role or a bad gig to start out in. And maybe he works his way up, continues with the organization for a year or two, maybe gets an opportunity down the road if he can showcase something. But I'm not. I don't think it was a bad team to go to at all either. Really good situation, defending NFC champs. Jalen Hurts, high-powered offense. But I wouldn't be surprised if he does find a way to make the roster. I think it would be probably in some sort of special teams role. Speaking of special teams, BT Potter, also undrafted. Not really surprised about that. You just don't know with kickers. Either these guys go, they get picked up because the team just values a kicker in particular, or organizations in no way, shape, or form will ever draft a kicker. So they just sit and they just wait. BT Potter got picked up by the Pittsburgh Steelers, not for a starting role. Chris Boswell's their kicker. They signed him to a multi-year deal not too long ago, but he has been injured, and he is a guy they don't have 100% trust in. So maybe they brought in BT Potter to be the backup, to be the scout team guy, and then maybe if they need him, hop on the active roster in case something happens to Chris Boswell. So it might just kind of been a nice little luxury pickup there to have with Potters. He signed a free agent deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, it's going to wrap up the Sunday chat. 2023 NFL draft in the books. I think it was a good year for Clemson players to have 2 guys go in the first round. Didn't have anybody go in the first round a year ago. So I think it's a good sign to see 2 guys. Had 2 guys go a couple years ago, 2 years ago in the draft with Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence, with going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Clemson, some good notoriety, I think, for the program to have 2 guys do that. And then, of course, the other guys who got drafted, nobody was a 6th or 7th round pick. Those 3 guys go in the 5th round. I think a lot of people know who they are. So good year for Clemson draft. 2024 should be even bigger. Be a lot of guys who'll be draft eligible, like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Barrett Carter, Nate Wiggins. A lot of big defensive names will be coming up and talked about a lot between now and next draft season. So thanks again for watching All Clemson Tigers. We appreciate you being a part of it. Please, once again, we're asking you, go to the subscribe button and like us on YouTube. That way you know everything we're going to be doing. And again, don't forget, Monday night, 7 p.m., it's Monday Live with Jason Priester. You do not want to miss that. So please go ahead and get subscribed now so you're set and ready to go for Jason. But thanks again. Want to say a big shout out to everybody out there who's following us and who's been watching our videos lately. And make sure you go to allclemsontigers.com for the latest in news and analysis. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great week. Take care.